Hey everyone. Okay, so it goes without saying, but this episode got a few extended bits, and of course, just knowing that, the question obviously arises: did it work? And I'd say for the most part, a lot of the minute changes, definitely new changes and extensions they made, definitely worked. As a lot of it was really just kind of was really Toei working around the edges with stuff, but they kept everything mostly the same. As this fight gave me the same vibe from reading. As this fight in the anime gave me the same vibe as reading this in the manga for the first time, and just showcasing how overwhelmingly powerful Blackbeard truly is, and but still kept that same vibe that everything was trying to pull from his bag of tricks was really just him doing all he could to just ensure that they all survive. But that's really all he could do, even in the small bits that I believe were added in the on his end. But I also like how we do get to see a little bit of Law's crew actually show some skill as well, and that's that there's more to them than just being there for the comedic relief. But okay, let's talk about the precedent this episode sets, because this episode definitely set a standard of expectations, because with how this episode handled the Law versus Blackbeard fight, I don't think Toei's gonna do all that much in regards to the kids' encounter with Shanks. At least I still hope not. And again, in that regard, I think I am more cautious. I'm not cautiously optimistic, but also thankful for that, because what happens to Kid is even more of a cautionary tale. That just because they've grown stronger doesn't mean you're entirely ready to handle the big dogs, as it were. And yeah, I know what happened in that moment between Shanks and Kid is still a bit sour for people, but it is kind of important one of showing that, yeah, Shanks is still a big dog. All that said, though, we see the episode end with Law getting consumed by Black Hole, and honestly, credit where it's due, the episode made me fear way more for what happens to Law after this more than the manga did. And after this episode, I'm even more convinced than I was before that Blackbeard might have just stolen Law's powers. And again, I'm hoping it's not true and that he just kind of took him out, so to speak. But if it is true, then that's going to be a huge "we're absolutely fucked" moment if true. But again, holding out hope it's not the case, but I don't know for sure. But okay, now let's talk about the thing in this episode, the other big thing in this episode, which is that it's revealed to us that Blackbeard has taken Charlotte Pudding hostage. So obviously he took advantage of Big Mom's absence for full cake. Now this is where the changes made to this episode compared to the manga get really interesting, because for those uninitiated, the part where we see the flashback of Ogre and Kuzan invading Whole Cake, that is actually a cover story from the manga, and honestly, I don't know how possible it would even be at this juncture, but I would really like to see Toei do more of this, because it's just this little flashback is doing something that I wish they had done more of in the earlier parts of the time skip, which is using these like cover stories in a way that does add more, in a way that's kind of expanding on the material, in a way that does flow more naturally into the story, rather than artificially trying to extend this episode. Again, I'm not sure how possible this is, because at this point Toei has already passed over a lot of these mini stories to the point where I don't know how they can adapt them naturally into the anime's main timeline without making it a sort of filler arc, which, yeah, I believe Toei also said they have no plans to do any more filler at this point. And yeah, the anime really, so again, I don't know, but I hope that there's still room for them to do this, because if they wanted to, little extensions like this, again, I think are the ones that really help. And yeah, the anime definitely made Kuzan look like much more like a fucking demon in that flashback, as Cracker was just stone cold afraid of him. And I also like how the only spoken dialogue through this flashback was from the narrator's perspective, and no one else talked. Like it was a totally silent. It was again, aside from the narrator, it was a totally silent experience that really and it actually worked to its favor in how it really captured the terror and really allowed like just the absolute madness of seeing Kuzan freeze Whole Cake and Cracker over to really just set in. And like it's one of those things where like, yeah, it's fucking terrifying. Getting back to Pudding herself though, revisiting her predicament in the anime is interesting because in retrospect I can clearly see the pieces Oda is placing on the board with this. It's just a matter of what he does with them, because in some shape or form I do believe this will get back to the Straw Hats, but because of what Pudding did to Sanji, it's more a question of how he'll become involved. And honestly, I tend to agree with what others have said, which is that I think Katakuri and Brûlé are going to be the sort of impetus that gets the ball rolling on this, especially with how thoroughly the family was defeated. They may feel desperate enough to turn to Luffy to start up some sort of alliance to get her back. Although that in itself also does raise the question I never thought to ask for, but where the fuck is Katakuri during all this? Like, seriously, like, he should have been there, but, like, what's, like, this is the one thing, this is the frustrating thing, I think, this is the one frustrating part with this side story and flashback, that, and just Pudding's whole predicament that never really made sense to me. Where is Katakuri in all this? Because you'd think Katakuri could hold his own against both Kuzan and Ogre, but I don't know. Like, I don't know. Something just feels off about him being absent from this. I don't know what the reasoning is there, but it better be a good one. But okay. Putting all that aside, I guess the only question now, I guess, is if it all plays out the way I think it will, how ultimately it actually does play out, because the only way how this all is going to play out in sequence, because the only way, because the big sticking point, if this is true, that Katakuri teams up with Luffy in order to save Pudding, it's one of those things where one of the biggest sticking points about this is that how is Oda going to make this play out without it feeling a final battle against Blackbeard? And the only way I can see that working is if Oda uses this as a means to humble Luffy even further by giving him a first-hand experience of how truly powerful Blackbeard has become. Because when you think about it, Luffy and Blackbeard are each other's best-kept secrets right now, as the only time they've met post-time skip has been through exchange of words, but they've never had a real confrontation against each other. So teaming up with Katakuri as a means to rescue Pudding, I think would give Luffy that genuine first-hand experience of just what kind of a threat Blackbeard has become. It would also probably be the best time to throw Shanks in the mix as well and have them reunite, although in that scenario that could potentially lead to the classic noble sacrifice bit, noble sacrifice of a mentor bit, although it would be interesting if Oda threw a curveball into that idea, assuming it happens. Because the only other way this works in my head is that Pudding's part of a long game that won't take shape until the final battle. Again, that's the only way I can see this playing out, but I don't know. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. From on Twitter, @Crunchroll. Be sure to notification bell with the subscribe button, and just share the video around, guys. Dark Knight, signing off. Later, everyone.